Find your groove, find your purpose, and don't make the mistake of comparing yourself or what you have to bring as value add to somebody else's. God has a destiny and a purpose for your life. It is your goal and your discovery to find that and allow people to pour into that. And then once you really see and realize, like, it's much better over here, it's going to come with its challenges and a set of obstacles and barriers, but God will give a spirit of endurance, and he will allow certain things to manifest in your life at the appointed time.
You are here. Welcome to the Purpose Finder podcast. This is the show where we uncover why you are truly here, and more importantly, how to make it your reality. My father, the late Dr. Miles Monroe, said the greatest tragedy in life is not death, but life without purpose. And research further shows that people with a strong sense of purpose are 2.4 times more likely to feel fulfilled. Each week, I sit down with extraordinary guests, entrepreneurs, artists, thought leaders who are boldly living their why. We dive deep into their journeys, the struggles they have overcome, their breakthroughs, and the lessons that can help you do the same. I am your beautiful host, Charissa Monroe Wilborn, and we're about to explore the mindsets, tools, and strategies to help you live a life with purpose, passion, and legacy. Are you ready? Let's go and dive into the episode. Welcome back to another great episode of the Purpose Finder podcast, where our mission is simple: to inspire you to find and uncover and live out your life's purpose, and to live a life overflowing with what? 3 things: meaning, fulfillment, and significance. Deep down, we all crave belonging. No one wants to feel unfulfilled, and we are all searching, asking the big question: why in the world am I here? Well, I hope your search ends now. Here with the Purpose Finder podcast, I am your host, Charissa Monroe Wilborn, and today I have the great honor and pleasure and privilege of sitting down with someone who doesn't only talk about purpose, he doesn't only think about it, he actually lives it out boldly. And we're going to explore his story, his lessons, and his journey together. Welcome, Vondale Singleton, my brother from another mother. How are you doing? Thank you so much for being here on the Purpose Finder podcast. I couldn't be doing this and not include you, your story, your life, and what you're doing big in the world. I just can't. And I know they're not here. They're not here to hear me read a script and read a bio. So I'm going to have you share about who you are and what you're doing. And then we can talk about how you and I actually met.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Purpose is a big thing and something I value in my life every single day. And, you know, as a kid growing up, born and raised on the south side of Chicago, anybody talk about the south side of Chicago, the west side of Chicago, there's a story behind that story. And my story really started in the early 80s. I was what they call a project kid. I grew up in the Otter B. Wells housing projects in a Bronzeville community. And my father and my mother were teenagers when I was conceived. And as a result, my mother earlier on, she struggled with the crack cocaine addiction and, of course, succumbed as a result of that in my earlier years. She was only 29 when she passed away. I was 14. She had me when she was 15. So that cycle of poverty, of you won't amount to be anything, that you will die before the age of 18, it was on my life at that particular time. And of course, my father, being young and trying to navigate Chicago, he ended up becoming both a drug dealer and a drug user. And of course, he got incarcerated when he was young. And I eventually got adopted by the government. I became a ward of the state. And it wasn't until my life changed when I met my mentor. And that mentor story kind of proceeds into what I'm doing today.
And you and I were talking off camera, and you mentioned that you are the first in your family to graduate. And no one will know that this was your story because you went to one of the best schools, best universities
Yes.
in the US. And I say that because that's where you and I
Yeah.
met. We were both we were both students at the Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And for anyone to be attending ORU, you you have to be doing you have to want to be doing something, and you also have to be very committed and disciplined.
Yes.
Um, and of course, I was a pastor's kid going there, and then you came, but I no one would have known that that was your
Yes.
story. No one would have known that um, you are a 14-year-old young boy whose father's on drugs, whose mom is not there. You're watered estate, and you're going to where? Like, how did you even hear about ORU?
Yes. So, fortunately, by God's grace, after those tragedies happened with my family, I remember one night being in the Marquette Upward Bound program, getting down on my knees and saying, God, if you real, send me help. That was my simple prayer. My mother had died. I didn't have a relationship with God. I didn't know my purpose or my value. I'm trying to just figure out how to survive the next day. But I remember just having this breakdown, crying, just praying this prayer. And the next day, we went on an upward bound trip to Minnesota. And I will never forget it. We came back, and the director at the time, Stephen Ray Robertson, he said, everybody got 5 minutes to go upstairs, do what you need to do, and be in your rooms. If you're not there in 5 minutes, you in a lot of trouble. So I didn't quite make the 5 minutes. And I remember him doing a bathroom check, in the dorm. And I was there brushing my teeth still. And he said, up, you got a punishment. You need to come to my room, and this is your punishment. And it was your father's book, In Pursuit of Purpose, Dr. Miles Monroe. And he said, you need to read this book. And I'm looking like,
He thought that was going to be
he
punishment,
thought it was
right?
going to be pumped, but he was intentional. He knew what he was doing. God was using him. Now, remember, I just
Okay.
prayed this prayer
Mm-hmm.
the night before. God, if you real, help me. So this was God's answer to my prayer, and my mentor answering the call at the time. And the next day, he said, did you read the book, that first chapter yet? I'm like, no. And I wasn't intending on reading that book. So he said, I need for you to read that first chapter, and tomorrow I'm going to give you another chance. So I was like, well, let me go ahead and flip through the book. And I started reading it. And it was just like God started speaking to my spirit, and everything started to make sense. I understood clearly. And this is my first time ever reading a book. You got to understand, at this time, I'm 16, 17 years old. And so the next day he came, he said, what did you learn? What did he talk about? And I started regurgitating everything that first chapter talked about, purpose. And if you don't know the purpose of a thing, abuse is inevitable. And all these things I start. And he was like, good, good. He said, do you know where he went to college? And I was like, no, I never heard of this man. He went to a college called Oral Roberts University. And I'm going to take y'all out to a college weekend. You remember college weekends? I went to a
Mm-hmm.
college
I
weekend
do.
for the first time. I'm still in high school. And that's when God spoke and said, that's why I needed to go to college, to Oral Roberts University. So he
Wow.
ended up using that book. That book was like a Bible to me. And then he gave me my first Bible, the same man. And he was like, I was just being used by God to help you get to the next level. But I'm gonna just pause right there because I got another follow-up story to tell about when I first met your father my freshman year at Oral Roberts University in 98.
Absolutely. And to think that punishment, we talk about turning your pain into
Yes,
purpose a lot. I know that's part of your story. But to think but it's almost turning punishment into purpose,
yes,
or punishment leading to purpose. Who in the world would have thought, first of all, how could you pick up a great book and say this is your punishment? However, now that I think about it, as parents, we do it a lot to our
sure.
children. We tell them, because you didn't do this, it's almost as though reading is a
Yes,
punishment. And So you give them this punishment, you give them this book to read, and little do you know, whether you knew what you were doing as a parent, as a coach, as a mentor, or whether you were intentional about it, little did you know that what was punishment for them at the time becomes the very thing that changes the entire trajectory of their life. And I've heard stories, Vondale, and I still hear stories to this day, 10 years after my parents' passing, of people being impacted by my dad. And everyone has varying stories as to how they met him, and how just picking up a book or someone gave it to them as a gift, or they came across a video. I've never heard the story, however, of someone being given this book as a punishment and it has changed their life. So that's definitely news to me. But whatever it takes, right?
Yes.
Like God will do whatever it takes to make sure that, like, He is trying His endeavor best to make sure that we do not continue to make the grave a wealthy place,
Yes.
but that we actually do uncover our purpose and live it out. And you're at that place where you're now. You're at one of the apexes of your life where you're the CEO and founder
Yes.
of Champ's Male Mentoring Program, and you're doing really well. You're changing the lives of other men, just like how someone changed yours. But that you weren't always there. You weren't always on this mountaintop. You hit rock bottom. And continue to tell us more about the rock bottom that you hit, the challenges, and then how and what did you do to overcome?
Yeah. So, again, just kind of speaking on, meeting this man who became my mentor. And he was a very wise man. He invited me on this trip to Tulsa, Oklahoma. I had never heard of Oral Roberts University. I didn't know anything about it being a Christian school. But once I got there, God began to speak with me and deal with me about this would be the launching pad to my life's work. And the very thing that he used in terms of mentorship is the very thing I do today. So I was able to unlock and discover my passion and my purpose. And I'll never forget, it was a brother named Julian. He was from Nassau, Bahamas, and he was maybe a sophomore at Oral Roberts University. And he was like, I'm going to get Miles Monroe, Dr. Miles Monroe, to come speak to all the boys on campus. And he did. And that was my freshman year. And I said, well, I better go up to the front of the chapel. So I sat in the front row. And now I never forget having the book in my hand that I just got a few months ago. Now, mind you, I wasn't raised in the church. I didn't know anything about Christ, but experienced a lot of tragedy. And God landed me there. So as I'm looking at the book and hearing your father and seeing his picture on the book and looking at him and like, this is really him, I conjured up the courage. I wouldn't have done this otherwise because I was too cool for school back then. So I wasn't going to go up to him and introduce myself and say, hey, I got your book as a punishment. But for whatever reason, God told me that I need to go up to your father and shake his hand and thank him for writing that book because I believe my life is about to change. And so after he spoke and he sung and played the piano, and man, your father was just way beyond his years in terms of his wisdom and talent and his ability to connect. And this
Absolutely.
chapel was specifically only for the young men. It was so he was talking to us about marriage and money and purpose and sexuality and all of these things. So it was a really high level conversation. And so afterwards, the chapel was over and I darted over to him. Like it was just something that came over me so strong. And I reached out my hand. Hey, Dr. Miles Monroe, my name Vondale Singleton. I'm from Chicago. My mentor gave me this book. And he looked and he had this huge smile on his face. And he's just like, young man, you are on purpose. You are in the right place. You are where God's supposed to have you here. This is the place that groomed me. And he started going off. Like, and I'm just like, yeah. He says, stay around the right energy. Stay around the right people. You can do this. You can make it.
Mm-hmm.
God's hand is, he just started ministering to me. And so my respect for this author who put this book in my hand in pursuit of purpose to give me a blueprint of what I supposed to become and how to discover it and find it is now directly speaking to this little boy from the south side of Chicago who experienced the loss of his mother, whose father was incarcerated, who was a ward of the state. Now, he didn't know all of that. So his words were giving me life real time. And I know many people have met your father, read his books. A lot of people wish they could have had a conversation with him. So that was one of many conversations I would have, because every time he came, I was going to find my way. You remember the guy? I'm the same
At
one
the
from
front of the line.
Chicago. And I had the privilege, and I have to say this is really important, to be invited by Dean Boyd, who became my mentor at Oral Roberts University. But a lot of people don't know he's also a pastor in North Tulsa. So I joined his church because I wanted him to mentor me. And he invited me, he says, hey, you got some time tonight? Dr. Miles Monroe and his wife, they're in town, and they're going to meet by Bishop McIntosh house afterwards. You want to go? I'm like, do I want to go? Are you crazy? I want to sit next to him, and I want to put my elbow next to his elbow. And I had the privilege to sit there for 3 hours with your mom and your father and just soak up wisdom. And I was just like, I get it. I need this mantle to drop off on me so I too can find my purpose in this way and what I'm called and have been assigned to do. And I promise you, I tell people all the time, that was the best meeting. And I've met President Bill Clinton. I've sat down with President Obama. I've met some phenomenal people in the world. But that one meeting actually catapulted my life for the next 20 years. Just those 3 hours.
One thing I hear you keep saying, and interestingly, you keep saying it, I'm Vondale Singleton from Chicago, and you keep saying it from Chicago, from Chicago. And Chicago gets this very bad rep of being one of the cities in the US that has the highest crime. Nothing what good could possibly come out of Chicago. But I hear you so excited, so elated to say, I'm not only Vondale Singleton, but I'm Vondale Singleton from Chicago. Let me tell you where I'm from so you know that Chicago does and can produce goodness. I mean, let me put it right here. My husband, everybody, is also from Chicago. So you already know goodness and greatness comes from Chicago. Barack Obama, you mentioned his name a little bit ago. He's also from Chicago. Like, there's so many great people, personalities that can come from from dirt. Greatness can come from mess. Greatness can come from darkness. Like, we don't have to succumb to our environment. We don't have to come to the story that's being told about who we're supposed to be. And I appreciate that you didn't become another statistic of another male from Chicago who either made it to prison or didn't make it at all past 17. So we just can hear them by name. But what do you think? What is that one thing or two things or three things that you think did not allow you to succumb to your circumstances?
Absolutely.
Because now you didn't have any parents. So now you were parents of your parent was the state.
Yes.
So now you could have gone either which way. But what made you go the way that you did?
Absolutely. And this may sound a little cliche, but for me, it was the thing that I needed the most. It was really discovering who I was in the kingdom of God. So my relationship with Christ, my mentor introduced me to Christ. He bought my first Bible. He gave me that first book, In Pursuit of Purpose. And I leaned in to this self-discovery and wanting to understand, who am I? What am I? Why am I? And then being around an environment like Oral Roberts, where we had to do Sunday church checks and we had to go to chapel every Wednesday and every Friday. Even though I was an education major, we had to take theology classes, right? And then getting around other individuals in that network and space that also was doing self-discovery and finding out their purpose and mission, it only sharpened the axe, if you will. So being around sharp individuals and then also understanding I didn't have a fallback plan. I didn't have a backup plan. This was the opportunity that I had to actually not just prove to myself, but prove to my community I was worth the investment. So I became the first one out my family to graduate from college. And so I had a responsibility to come back and give back and pour into the next generation through the way I received it. And that was through mentorship.
I was about to say one thing, and the second thing you keep saying, and that you've said this entire time, is your mentor,
Yes.
your mentor, your mentor. So I must bring that to the forefront, because one of the greatest things that, to those of you that are listening, that you can do for yourself is to make sure that you are very much aware of who you are surrounding yourself with. Who is your environment? What is your environment? Where is your environment? Who are you allowing to pour into you? Who are you allowing into the gates of your soul, your eyes, your ears? Like, those things are very important. And who you allow to speak into your life is going to be a big determinant to determine into where you go, to who you become. And for you, Vondale, it was this mentor who thought that punishing you was going to be a true punishment. And like I said, like you said, he know what he was doing, and that's what he called it. But if you imagine, if you would had another mentor, because mentors can come in all shapes and
Yes.
sizes. They can come positive, negative. They can be an encouragement. They can be an advantage, a disadvantage to you. Imagine if you had a mentor who you looked up to because they could tell you how to get fast
Right.
money,
Exactly.
and that's what you were after. That would have been the way that you would have gone.
Exactly.
But you made sure that, and I love the fact that you were wise enough at that young age to still, especially as a male, as a man, as a boy, to still want to be connected to another man figure, even though even though your father wasn't there, and even if he was there, even though he wasn't the best example at all. You knew, you were smart enough to know that, but I don't want to do this without a male figure. I don't want to do this without a father figure. And then along the way, here you are 30 years later, 40 years later, being the father, I'm sure, to so many other boys, young boys, teenage boys who need a mentor just like you had, so that they don't go the other way, the other way. And it's not always easy having a mentor, because exactly, your mentor is going to punish you. Sit you in a corner and say, read this book, and we need to be able to talk about it, you know? And a mentor mentee relationship is very reciprocal, is
Yes.
very two-way. And my dad talks about that very, very often, especially when dealing with leadership.
Mm.
Because as leaders, no matter how high we are, and I'm almost going to say this and not even assume, but I'm going to say that you probably still have a
Oh, yes.
mentor, if not
Absolutely.
mentors,
Multiple
today.
mentors. Absolutely.
How important it is for you, Vondale, as someone who has made it. You have graduated. You have now created your own family, wife, beautiful wife, children who also went to ORU. Um, and here you are doing well for yourself, have done very well. Your mother and father, if they were in their right mind, would be very proud of you. Why is it so important for you to still to this day have mentors in your life?
Yeah, the importance is for me, it's a really humbling experience when you can go full circle. I always reflect every day. I think about my mom and I'm like, man, I wish she would have came to my 8th grade graduation. I wish she would have made it to my high school graduate. I wish she would have saw me at ORU walk across that college stage. She wasn't alive then, but I use that as motivation to keep going at times where I wanted to give up and quit. But I said, there's a village depending on me to make it. I haven't even met these young men yet. And I want to be that model for them to let them know it is possible. You can come from the same zip code, overcome, beat the odds, and now you have an obligation to pay it forward. And so for me, it's important for people to know that same mentor that I met when I was 17, 18, when he gave me that book, he's still my mentor to this day. He's actually on my board for our champs organization. He's a board of
Wow.
directors for my program. And just recently we were both invited to Walt Disney World to be judges for over 10,000 applications to narrow down 400 to 100. And we sitting there looking at each other. It's like, who would have thought? The time that we had in the late 90s, now we getting a chance to impact, and just through our program alone and champs in Chicago locally, in 11 years we've probably impacted over 8,000 young people, young men, through our organization alone. And that's just a small footprint, but it's what you said, like, that one person is able to make that impact, and that impact is able to make more impact. And so for me, always having mentors that are a little bit further down the road than I am, pour into me as I pour into these young men, is critically important. And I try my best to find the best in their fields, in their areas. And often times these are business leaders, these are brand leaders, these are faith leaders. So they can be a blind spot for me. I have colleagues that are wonderful, and we have great relationships, but I also have a lot of men that check me, that hold me accountable, and that pour into me. And that's what keeps me grounded and rooted and fresh and young and youthful. And like you mentioned, my wife, who's also a ORU alum, she's a school principal here in the city. We've been married going on 22 years, and it seems like yesterday, because that's really important for me. My foundation at home, that when I serve and do all this community work, and I have some amazing opportunities to lead, community leadership in Chicago, when I come home, it's a refuge for me. It's a fortress for me. We build and empower one another and encourage and inspire one another inside. So when we leave, we have that identity. We know who we are. And that, to me, is one of the biggest lessons I try to model for the young men that I mentor. Is like, man, keep first things first. Is God, your family. Keep those relationships intact and continue to grow in those relationships. So it's beautiful.
I can hear it, and I love the fact that, again, as leaders, as people who are focused, who are purpose driven and focused on what we're doing as far as purpose is concerned, there are times when we can lose sight of, like you say, what's most important, what's number one. And it doesn't mean that we're so focused on something that's distracting and something wrong that we're losing sight. We're just so focused on everybody else. Everyone is pulling on us. Then that feels good when you are getting the smiles and the accolades from the outside, forgetting that you shouldn't be getting any glory. Everything we do is for the glory of God. And then after that, first of all, the first people that you should be serving is your spouse, your wife, your husband, your children. And your children are the boy and girl, are the ones that are looking up at daddy. They're looking up at mommy. They're watching. They may say nothing, but they're watching. So even now, for instance, with my almost 2 year old, we travel a lot, my husband and I. We do a lot of work, ministry work, this place, that place. And it is imperative for me, and I said this to him, and he is completely on board, to have my daughter, I don't care how old she is, to have my children with me from young, so that they can watch what mommy and daddy is doing, so that they can see how hard mommy and daddy are working to change the lives of others. So that, and they may not understand what in the world right now, they're just living their best life, if you ask me. Hop on, on from plane to plane, place to place, just enjoying life, eating good food, just chilling. They at the pool while I'm on stage, but nonetheless, they're there. It was, I never wanted to be that parent who, I'm somewhere, my child is home with the nanny or the babysitter.
Yes.
No, babysitter, nanny, let's go. We all going, and it's because children are
Mm.
watching. And so at some point, my child is going to say to me, man, mom, my earliest memory at 4 years old was watching you and dad speak on stage. I didn't know what you guys were saying, but I just thought it was beautiful. How do I hope I can do that one day? Do you know what is going to happen to my heart when my child says that to me eventually? You have no idea. But but we're training them. So to know and to hear that you say in all of the purpose driven life that you're doing, your family is first, God is first. Like, that is key
Yes.
relationships that you truly and truly must make sure are intact. And when you think about, because you weren't always married, you didn't always have kids, and then purpose came later. But if you had to describe what life was before you answering your call, answering the call in your life, to after answering the call, how would you describe that? Like, how was life before and after purpose? Hey, purpose seekers. If this conversation has you thinking about your purpose, what it is, how to find it, and how to truly live it, then I have something just for you. Introducing the Purpose Finder Formula. And you have the free access to my 20-minute training designed to help you uncover your purpose and to start living it with confidence. No fluff, no guesswork. It's clear, practical, step by step guide to finding meaning and gaining clarity and direction. Your purpose is calling. Are you ready to answer? Head over to www.charissamonroe.com/purpose finder formula. Enter your info and I'll send it straight to your inbox. Imagine waking up every day knowing your life has meaning, impact, and joy. That's what awaits you. So don't wait. Grab your free training today. Now, let's get back to the episode.
I tell people that God gave me the ability to see two different people and two different lives in one body. So before 18, I thought I was living in a nightmare, quite honestly. But after 18 and finding Christ and finding purpose and definitely going to ORU and being in this environment where I just got saved a few months ago and I just kind of like leaned into this space and place, and it really started developing me. And then of course meeting my wife and getting married and going into the education world, it was like, wow, this is not completely perfect and easy, but it's a lot easier now that I have Christ, now that I have support, now that I have a wife who's cheering me on and vice versa. I'm cheering her on because I could not imagine living a life like the first 18 years, the rest of my life. So I would say
Mm.
if you don't know Jesus, try him. Um,
Try them out for
Come
size,
on.
huh?
And also find your groove, find your purpose, and don't make the mistake of comparing yourself or what you have to bring as value add to somebody else's. God has a destiny and a purpose for your life. It is your goal and your discovery to find that and allow people to pour into that. And then once you really see and realize like it's much better over here, yeah, it's going to come with its challenges and a set of obstacles and barriers, but God will give a spirit of endurance and he will allow certain things to manifest in your life at the appointed time. And like I can tell you all of the places that we've been able to go just because I'm in purpose. The invitations that we get, the opportunities that we get is absolutely incredible. In a million years, I would have never imagined just being obedient and saying, all right, I'm gonna lock in. I want to be the Michael Jordan of mentorship. I tell people that I want to be the GOAT of mentorship, of community. And because of that sacrifice, I've seen time and time and time again doors open, not so much for me, but for the young people that I'm mentoring. And I'm saying, like, hey, let me tell you something. When you get in this door and you get this opportunity, the same thing I did for you, you have an obligation to do for somebody else.
So you talk about being married for 22
Yes.
years, yet the first 18 years of your life, there was no example
Yes.
of marriage. There was no example of a good marriage. There was no example of a successful marriage. There was no example of what it is to be a father, worse yet, a husband. But here you are with a beautiful wife, beautiful home structure, 22 years of marriage. How? And I ask this question not for me, but there is others listening who the excuse for them is still, well, I didn't have the example of a marriage in the home that I was raised. My parents divorced when I was 2. My my dad used to hit my mom, and so that's all I know. And excuse after excuse. But here you are not having that. But with a 22-year, and I'm not going to say perfect because I don't know if, I'm sure that marriage itself was a
Yeah.
journey, because everything in life is a journey and a progress and a process. But how did you do it with no example at all?
Oh, that's a great question. And, a lot of the lessons and the wisdom that I've gathered throughout my life was by watching what was wrong. So earlier on,
Watching what was
yes.
wrong.
So earlier on in my life, I saw everything that was wrong about the things that a lot of my family members did and were doing. So I'm like, drinking alcohol leads to violence because when they drunk, they not thinking straight. And now I see my family fighting each other. Noted, not the drink. I'm not going to do that. The same thing with promiscuity. I saw what was taking root in the house, and I saw the impact and the effect and the effect of decision making that was poor. So I would always study everybody else, and a lot of what I was seeing before 18 was wrong. And so I said, I'm going to do the opposite of what I saw. I always wanted to have a stable home and have peace in my home. So I used to dream about being married.
But where did that come from? Even though your home wasn't stable, because you find that what happens in life is people tend to live the life
Yeah.
they lived when they were growing up. And so my home isn't stable, so then they end up not having a stable home.
Yeah.
Or you do truly have men like yourself who say, I don't want to be raised the way I was raised, and then I don't want to raise my children the way my dad raised me. I don't want to be a father the way my dad was, lack the or the lack thereof. And then they start to overcompensate. But from young, you were already saying, that's wrong. No, I don't want that. That leads to this. That leads to that. No, I don't. What is it about Vondale or about your environment at whatever time that made you recognize right and wrong so just so easily, so quickly, and then that made you say, I always dreamed of a stable home. Even though I didn't have a stable home, how do I get that?
Yeah. So as a little boy, and I'll tell you a story that actually happened. This is how I knew that God's hand, number one, was on my life because it's many times I can talk about where I should have been dead, been shot at close range, bullets didn't touch me, like crazy stuff. But it was one time that took place, and this was early 80s. We found a wallet in Otterby Wells housing projects in Bronzeville. Me and a brother named Antonio. I picked up the wallet. He snatched it from me because he's older. He about 9, 10. I'm about 5 or 6 years old. He opens the wallet. It's about $80 cash in the wallet. We can see the man's driver's license, his ID, all this stuff. And I said out of my mouth to him, hey, we need to find this man and give him his wallet back. He like, you crazy. We not giving this wallet back. Man, let's go across the street to Foot Locker, Baskin Robbins, and KFC. Let's get some food. And then we're going to go to Jewel's and get some groceries. Man, we ain't giving this wallet. You crazy. We found it. Why should we give the wallet? And he's telling me this. And I said, no, that's wrong. You should give him his wallet back. He's like, I don't even know this man. We found it. We don't know who he is. He don't know we found. Do you know 15 years later, he came to me and said, this is how I know you were different. He said, you remember when we found that wallet when we were young and you told me I need to give him wallet back and all this, and I laughed at you and told him no. He said, your words convicted me for days that I looked for this man, and I actually found the man in the projects and I returned his wallet. And I never told you this story. He said that man came to me and said, young man, thank you for giving me my wallet. I've been looking all over for my wallet. I have bills to pay and I have a family to feed and take care of. Because you were a good Samaritan, I'm going to give you half of the $80. Here, take 40, young man. And he said that taught me something about integrity and leadership, but it also taught me about how I knew you was going to be a leader one day because you were doing this since you was a little boy, even though all of us around here wasn't doing that. So I can't even tell you where it really started. I just knew God innately designed me to be a leader, to be a guide, to be a voice, to be a mentor. And it's just something that I always want. I hated violence. I hated it with a passion. And yet, God allowed me to go through it, see it, experience the other side of it, and come back and say, hey, y'all, I've seen that. I've been a part of that. Let's go this direction, not that other way. Let's have a good family, not a bad one. Let's take care of our wives and our children and not abuse them and leave the moms single parents. So I can't even, I just always wanted to have that peace and harmony. And as a result, God has blessed me with that. And to your point, no, it's not perfect. Nobody's perfect, but it's a joy to have that.
Man.
Yeah.
So you tell I'm sorry. I'm gonna go there, and I'm gonna go here because I know that the people that are gonna be listening to this are there. Or they have a son that's there, or there's a young man that's gonna be listening that doesn't think that he can get out of what he's in. So I wanna go to those stories of you missing bullets and almost being shot and you shouldn't be here. I kind of want to go there because as you even mentioned this story, all I hear is purpose protects, purpose
Mm,
protects. And I encourage those that are listening, like your purpose
wow.
protects you no matter where you are in life. You may think that you are being abused, someone is misusing you, someone is abusing you because they don't understand you're on the streets and don't know how to get out, and you just happen to stumble across this podcast and you're like, I was just shot yesterday, or I was almost shot yesterday, and you're like, but I don't have anywhere to go, I don't have any family, I don't have community. And but then you're wondering, how am I still living, why am I still breathing? Like your purpose that God created you for is protecting every part of you. Now at some point it's going to be your responsibility to say, okay, I have fought enough. Let me just give in. And there's going to be a time when God is like, I'm trying, I'm trying, I'm trying. You may succumb to your circumstances and meet the grave completely filled with what you came in, or you may leave it empty. But your purpose is protecting you. And I'm watching Vondale and I'm hearing his stories, and I'm just watching how the purpose that God has for his life that he's living out right now, he was protecting him when he was 4, 5, 6, 14, 18, 20, and now he's where he's at. And thank the Lord for your obedience, Fondell. You're having the discernment to listen to the calling and voice of God's purpose on your life, to say, I accept it and I'm going to be uh, that voice for someone else. But I do want to talk about, and you can share whichever story makes you comfortable, in those moments where and why you shouldn't, you at the wrong place at the wrong time. You shouldn't be here dodging bullets, missing bullets, but then here you are.
Yes. I'll kind of get into one personal story that kind of painted the picture. My father, um, and and I don't know if I've ever publicly shared this, but I think it's important in context of what you just shared, and what I'm talking about with purpose and how you just brought this. Purpose protects. It really does. As a little boy, my father earlier on, he was out, selling some drugs. He got shot, and I'll never forget 514 East 36th Street, apartment 202. And I was a little boy, came to the door. My aunt at the time kind of interceded and got in front of the door because you can hear yelling outside in the hallway. And he came in, and I just saw the blood. And my auntie grabbed me and took me to the back room and came back and proceeded to help my father. Oh, who shot you? Who did this to my little brother? And this, that, and the other. And I just remember again taking note, like, it's abnormal. But why is this so normal? Why is this so frequent? And as a little boy, kind of grappling with this whole idea of what would have happened to me had I learned that my father was not just shot, but he was shot and killed at that particular age. I'm wrestling with this as a little boy in the back room. So I remember going to my father. He recovered eventually. And I remember him underneath that mattress, putting a gun and the drugs underneath. And he looked at me and said, "Son, I don't want you to touch these guns and drugs. Do you hear me? I'm 5 years old. I got to go to kindergarten over at, it was Doolittle now, it's Urban Prep now, right on 35th. I had to get up and go to school in the morning. But my father's teaching me a valuable lesson about the street life and how it all has an expiration date. And even though we wasn't saved, God was using my father to speak directly to me about preservation and about things I shouldn't be doing that he was doing that he wanted to protect me from. Let's get on that. Purpose protects. And so I'm listening to my father, and what I'm hearing is that my father loved me. He don't want me to go down the path that he's going. And when he said what he said, the reason why I don't want you to touch these guns and drugs is because I'm only doing this to help try to take care of you. And I love you, son. Now go to bed. Now, this heavy trauma. Then again, I'm taking note. And as because he was my father and I love my father, I respected him enough not to touch the guns and drugs all the way throughout my life. But that was God speaking to me. So let me tell you something. Maybe you're not in a home where everybody's saved. Maybe you're not in a family where everybody got it all together. Maybe you're going through trauma right now as we speak. But I'm here to tell you as a witness that God can use the very people in your house that may be even causing pain to bring life in that little project room of 514 East 36th Street, apartment 202. And those words will actually keep me away from drugs and away from gun violence. To this day, I truly believe that. And I saw a lot, but that's one story I remember. That incident with my father getting shot and him, trying to protect himself, putting the guns and drugs, but he telling me not. And I just felt like that was God speaking to me. And he honored.
And how did your relationship with your father progress over the years from there?
Yes, that's a great question. So I would tell people all the time that my father never deserted me in terms of being in my life. My mom was younger than my father, and my father actually had to get legal custody of me when I was a little boy because my mom was strung out on drugs really bad. And at the time, I was living with my mother. I don't even think my brother was born. I have a younger brother. We're about 5 years apart. But my mom, she was a sweet lady, but she did not have discipleship. She did not have mentorship. Neither did she have guidance. She was a young lady, young girl trying to raise a baby on the south side of Chicago in the projects. Hard, hard, hard. And so my father was like, I want to get legal custody of my son because his mom's strung out. They not together. So he had always been in my life, but my father always struggled. He was a good guy, very gregarious, worked at the Sears Tower. People call it Willis Tower. Chicagoans call it Sears Tower. Had a job, became employee of the year there, but he was tied to the street life and eventually got put in prison because of, drugs and some other things, and eventually died. So, you talking to somebody who didn't have his parents. Mom died when I was 14, father died later, but he had always kind of been in my life, but he was always trying to figure who he was out. And I kind of advanced him. And then he said, "Son, you way further than me. And I'm your father. So can you help me?" And of course, I moved him in my house. And my wife and I, we took care of him for years in our space. And so but that's a very, very touchy story. But I also like to share with my mentors and mentees, like, no, we Vondale didn't have it together at all. I went through, and yet I made the decision that I wanted to be on the other side, fighting the good fight of faith.
But I think it's also a beautiful
Mm,
story to hear that even though your father was very involved in abusing drugs and the street life, he still loved
yes,
you
without
enough to
question.
try and teach you, please don't go this way. Don't do as I
Yes,
do, do as I
yes,
say. And then On the other side of that, here it is, you did not turn your back
Mm,
from your dad. You didn't decide that because that's the route you want to take, and I don't want to take that route, I have to remove myself, or I have to disconnect myself. Like, you continue to honor your
mm,
father and your mother even though they weren't the best. And then to hear you, and you said it very loosely, but I heard it, and your wife and you invited him into your home,
yeah.
and you took care of this man who, although he wasn't the best
Mm,
example for you, he was there for you.
mm, mm,
And there are a lot of men that are walking around with anger towards their fathers, especially because either they weren't there, or they were there and they weren't the father that they thought they should have been. And you could have done that. You could have said, I'm in this position and I'm in this predicament and I don't have this because of you. You didn't do this and you continue to do that. You have no right to tell me what to do. But you didn't take that as your stance. You respected your dad. You loved your dad. You can still talk about him to this day, but be very honest with where he was as just growing up. And he may have been trying his endeavor best to get out of that, didn't know any better, but he knew that he didn't want this for his son. And to know, I had to go back to know that you and your wife would say, but he is still dad, and if we have to care for him until the day that he passed, we're going to do
yes.
exactly that, in spite
Yes.
of. And then you get to talk to your dad or talk about your dad to your children.
Yes.
And you get to say, regardless of what granddad did or didn't do, he's still your granddad. I'm here because of him. And then here are the good things that came out of who he was. And you just gave two or three very greatness that came out of your dad, even though the other part of it, the other side could be dark and bleak. And um, I just think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. Um, I think it's beautiful. And so, right here, if you had to give the best advice to especially the men, I don't care how old you are, to the men listening to you, what would that be? And then I would like for you to share the best advice you got
Hmm.
that you applied.
Yes. Men, we all come from a lot of broken pieces and broken places. But in those broken pieces and places, we can puzzle up a testimony of greatness, a testimony of boldness, a testimony of courageousness, to look at them in the mirror and say, it is what it is. However, I want more, I desire more, and more comes from a community of folks that's willing to hold you accountable. And that's why men, we cannot be afraid to share our traumas, our hurts, our pains, our habits, our hobbies, our secrets, because we don't know how that testimony will help someone else. And I can tell you this: I've learned so much from my father. No, my father didn't get a college degree. He graduated from a school called Phillips here on the south side of Chicago from high school. But he did stand up for me in terms of trying to get legal custody of me, going down to City Hall, and he stood his ground. And I saw a lot of weak moments and a lot of areas of brokenness with my father because, again, he didn't have the proper mentorship and covering. So, men, I'm telling you right now, there is a world waiting for your embrace to come as you are, as your authentic self. But you have to admit that you need the help, that you want the help, that you want to grow. And then for young men who are really trying to find who I am, we do something called identity formation. We want to form who you really are. You come from the origin of great kings, a great lineage of the strongest of the strongest. If you're living in America today, that means somebody had to carry pain and hurt over the waters and seas to get here. And everybody that came over here did not make it. So remember, you are the strongest of the strongest of the strongest. It is in our DNA. And I want to call folks to a place of, openness, of trust, of process. And all of this stuff didn't happen overnight with me. I'm still on the road of discovery. I'm excited about 2025 because there's some big dreams I have and some goals and some ideas. And I lay my hat on breaking past this imposter syndrome, saying I don't belong, saying
Mm.
I don't deserve it. I fight that
I'm not worthy.
every single day of my
Mm.
entire life. And I'm okay with that thorn in my flesh
Wow.
because it keeps me pointed towards the cross. And it keeps me in a place where I am in constant need of God's help. And I get it through my wife. I get it through my community. I get it through the other mentees. I learn from them just as much as they learn from me. I get it through faith, what Sister Monroe is doing and the legacy of her father. I still listen to her father's teachings. I remember her father said, "Hey, before God give that man a wife, he gonna give him a job, right? He gave Adam that job." And so those are the things, all of these elements, the good, the bad, the ugly, the trauma, the pain, it allows us to be beautiful, authentic, just the way we are. And so let's invite community into this space, whether it's through reading, whether it's through going to church or getting Bible study or getting coaching or training. Let's be good to ourselves. Let's have grace on our lives and let's forgive ourselves to be better.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you touched on men being open and being honest about their trauma and understanding that you being vulnerable is a word that we use a lot now, especially for men, and opening up about your trauma, about what you're truly going through, does not mean that you're weak. There's nothing weak about Vondale, but he can talk about it. There's nothing weak about there was nothing weak about my dad, but he would talk about any past trauma that he may have experienced. Like there's nothing weak about you expressing and looking for help, seeking help. The best way that you can show up for other men in your life, whether it be your children, your own biological sons and daughters, or men that or young boys that you probably serve. The best way that you can show up for them is it's a part of you that's actually healing, that's open up to restoration, that's open up to finding your true self and true happiness again. And Rondell, I thank you for sharing that. um we as women talk about the emotions a lot because that's just how we are made up. Sometimes men need to hear from other men. And so this is not a podcast that you're just going to find a bunch of women. No, I want the men to be able to hear from other men that it is okay to be open. It is okay to trust. It is okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to have trauma and talk about it. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you less handsome, less sexy. It doesn't make you less anything. It just makes you
That's right.
human. Just
That's
makes you
it.
human.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a program that you started how many years ago?
It's year 11.
Year 11. Uh, Champs Male Mentoring Program.
Yes.
And well, I don't want to go. You tell us a little bit about that program, kind of what it does, and then what's the best way for people to support you or just look up what you're doing.
Yes, we have an amazing program called Champs Mentoring Program. I started 11 years ago here in Chicago. And at Champs is an acronym. It stands for Culturally Helping and Making Positive Success. And we believe that every young person is born to win in every situation in life. That's our motto. And we really focus on social emotional learning, mental health, leadership development, and as I mentioned, identity formation. So we've worked with hundreds of kids across the city, and our desire is to continue to create along this way these under these 6 milestones, like being ready to learn in school, to being able to read by third grade, all the way up to having safe and peace in your homes and many options in terms of your career and job. So I like to think that we a program on the move. We part of a bigger conglomerate with My Brother's Keeper under the Obama Foundation. I've been selected as the new My Brother's Keeper Chicago director for the Backbone. And so the work out for us, yes,
Nice.
thank you so much.
Hey,
Work,
brother.
yes, it's a lot of work, but to be able to have, the trust of the community to kind of lead this work, I'm leaning into any and everybody that want to support, especially our boys and young men of color. That's why we provide therapists to meet with our families and young men so they can talk through their trauma. We pay for it free of charge. And we will continue to do things like that to support this move. So if you want to look us up, you can go to champsmentoring.com or at champsmentoring on social media and support the great work that we're doing in Chicago and beyond.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Remember to visit www.champsmentoring.com to support all things that Vondale is doing and just kind of see more. If you're interested in enrolling, do you ever enroll men that are not in Chicago
Yes, we have two
or
chapters
just
even
oh
in
okay.
Tulsa and some parts of the United States as well. So if you're in other cities, just go to our website and reach out through our link, and we'll follow up with you.
Awesome. So you have no excuse. It's accessible to all. So let's thank Vondell so much for being here. You've watched another beautiful episode of the Purpose Finder podcast, and I am so grateful. And I hope that all that you have heard and allowed to resonate in your spirit actually produces great fruit. If you don't remember anything else, remember that purpose is protecting you. So you have just this amount of time to discover and live out your life boldly so that you can what? Get to the grave completely empty. I'm your host, Teresa Monroe Wilborn. And until next time, God bless. See you soon. And ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap on this episode of the Purpose Finder podcast. I hope today's conversation lit a fire within you because purpose isn't just something you chase, it is something you live every single day. If this episode resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more people on their journey to purpose. Let's continue the journey together. Join the Purpose Finder community on Facebook for exclusive insights, tools, and a tribe of purpose-driven people just like you. And remember, the two most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. Your purpose isn't far off. It's already within you. It's time for you to uncover it and live it boldly. Until next time, stay inspired, stay intentional, and keep walking in your purpose.